The email appeared on my screen at 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday. Subject line: compensation adjustment. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The words blurred as I read them once, twice, 3 times. 20% pay reduction. Effective immediately. Department restructuring, they called it. I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles turning white against the cheap laminate. Around me, the office hummed with normal Thursday energy. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. Someone laughed at the coffee station. Nobody noticed that my world had just imploded. I looked up to see him. Marcus Hollenbeck, my boss, leaning against his office doorframe with his arms crossed. He was watching me. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Satisfied one. The kind of smile that said he'd been waiting for this moment, planning it even. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment I stopped being the loyal employee who absorbed every insult, every slight, every broken promise. This was the moment I became something else entirely. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribs and was slowly tightening them. The rage came first, hot and blinding, making my vision pulse at the edges. Then came the disbelief, the part of my brain that kept insisting this had to be a mistake. 5 years. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of cancelled plans, of relationships that withered because I was always at the office. 5 years of crushing sales targets, of landing impossible accounts, of saving deals that everyone else had given up on. I'd brought in $17 million in new business just last quarter. 17 million. The email sat open on my screen, mocking me with its corporate language. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my computer through the window. I wanted to storm into Marcus's office and demand answers. But I didn't. I sat perfectly still, forcing my face into a neutral expression. Because somewhere beneath the rage and shock, a cold clarity was forming. A plan was beginning to take shape. My boss cut my pay after record sales, so I took the contract that kept his division alive. Even thinking the words made my pulse quicken. The injustice of it burned in my throat like acid. Record sales. Record performance reviews. Record everything. And this was my reward. A 20% pay cut dressed up as restructuring. But Marcus had made a critical mistake. He thought I would accept this. He thought I would swallow my anger, update my resume, and quietly disappear like all the others he'd pushed out over the years. He thought wrong. My mind was already racing ahead, cataloging everything I knew about our department, about our clients, about the contracts that kept Central Division running. Marcus was good at taking credit. He was terrible at actually doing the work. And I knew exactly where all the bodies were buried, every vulnerable point, every dependency he didn't even know existed. This wasn't going to be emotional. This wasn't going to be messy. This was going to be strategic, calculated, and absolutely devastating. My name is Avery Callahan. I'm 31 years old, and for the last 5 years, I've been the person who actually kept Central Division alive while Marcus Hollenbeck collected bonuses for my work. I started here straight out of business school, hungry and determined to prove myself. I was the youngest account manager they'd ever hired, and plenty of people thought I couldn't handle the pressure. The industry veterans, the ones who'd been selling for decades, they looked at me and saw someone who would wash out within 6 months. Proved them wrong. Deal by deal, client by client, I built relationships that became the foundation of our entire revenue stream. I learned to read people, to anticipate their needs before they even articulated them. I became the person clients called directly, bypassing the official channels because they trusted me more than the company. And Marcus. He took credit for every win while blaming me for losses I'd inherited from his poor decisions. Now he'd pushed too far. I still remembered my first day in this building. 5 years ago, walking through those glass doors with my second-hand briefcase and my best interview suit that I'd worn 3 times already. The office had seemed huge then, intimidating with its chrome fixtures and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. I'd been assigned to Marcus's team, which everyone whispered was the graveyard shift. the place where promising careers went to die. Marcus had a reputation for burning through employees, for taking credit and deflecting blame. But I needed the job. Student loans didn't pay themselves. So I put my head down and worked. I stayed late when others left early. I volunteered for the difficult accounts, the angry clients, the impossible deadlines. Slowly, I built a reputation of my own. Clients started requesting me specifically. My sales numbers climbed. By year 3, I was carrying 40% of the division's revenue. By year 5, it was closer to 60%. And my reward? A 20% pay cut. I sat at my desk for 2 hours after receiving that email, barely moving. To anyone watching, I probably looked like I was working. My fingers moved across the keyboard. My eyes scanned documents on my screen. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I was reviewing every interaction with Marcus over the past year, looking for the moment when he'd decided I was expendable. Had it been when I'd corrected him in front of a client? When I'd received that industry award he thought should have gone to him? Or was it simpler than that? Was I just making too much money for his comfort, threatening his own position by being too good at my job? Around me, the office continued its normal rhythm. Phones rang. People walked past my cubicle. Someone heated fish in the microwave, and the smell wafted through the 3rd floor. I wrote 3 different emails to Marcus, each one more angry than the last. I deleted all of them. Anger was useless. Evidence was power. That afternoon I started digging through our contract database. I had access to everything. Another perk of being the person who actually did the work while Marcus played golf with executives. Our system was a mess, poorly organized and inconsistent. But I knew it better than anyone. I started with the small accounts, the ones nobody paid attention to. As I reviewed them, patterns emerged. Marcus was sloppy. He signed off on contracts without reading them. He made promises we couldn't keep, then left me to clean up the disasters. But there was one contract that caught my attention. Frontier Analytics. A mid-sized client that didn't generate huge revenue, but their contract had an interesting clause. They required quarterly reviews with their designated account manager. Their contract specifically named me. Not Central Division. Not our company. Me personally. If I left, they had grounds to terminate. And Marcus had no idea. I kept scrolling, finding 3 more contracts with similar language. Clients who'd insisted on working with me specifically had negotiated those terms. My value wasn't just in sales numbers. It was legally binding. The call came 2 days after the pay cut email. Frontier Analytics, ironically enough. Their CFO, Warren Blackwell, sounded frustrated. He'd been trying to reach Marcus for a week about a contract modification they needed. Marcus hadn't returned any of his calls. This was typical. Marcus ignored the tedious work of client management, assuming someone else would handle it. Usually that someone was me. But Warren didn't know about my pay cut. He didn't know I was quietly planning my exit strategy. He just knew he needed help, and I was the person who'd always delivered. I listened to his concerns, took detailed notes, and promised to look into it. After I hung up, I pulled up Frontier's contract. The modification they wanted was simple, but it required Marcus's signature as division head. Without it, their contract would expire in 30 days. And if Frontier walked, they'd take their $2.3 million annual contract with them. A cold thrill ran through me. This was leverage. This was power. And Marcus had no idea the sword hanging over his head. The next team meeting was on Monday. I arrived early, taking my usual seat near the back. Marcus liked to run these meetings like performance reviews, putting people on the spot and criticizing their work in front of everyone. It was his favorite intimidation tactic. But today I had a different plan. When Marcus asked for updates on Q3 projections, I raised my hand. He looked surprised. I usually stayed quiet unless directly questioned. I kept my voice calm and professional as I pointed out 3 inefficiencies in our current process. I didn't attack Marcus directly. I simply noted where things were falling through cracks, where clients weren't getting responses, where contracts were at risk. I phrased everything as concerns we should address as a team. But everyone in that room knew who was responsible for those failures. I watched Marcus's face turn red as I spoke. He tried to brush off my points, but our colleague Bryn nodded along with everything I said. So did Cade, our junior analyst. The seeds were planted. People were starting to see what I'd known for years. Marcus was the weak link. He cornered me after the meeting. His office door closed a little too firmly behind us, making me flinch. But I kept my expression neutral, professional. Marcus stood too close, trying to use his height as intimidation. Might have worked 5 years ago. Didn't work now. He asked what I thought I was doing, questioning his leadership in front of the team. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I met his eyes and didn't blink. I told him I was simply raising concerns about our client retention numbers, which had dropped 8% in the last quarter. Was he aware of that decline? His jaw clenched. Of course he wasn't aware. He didn't track actual metrics. He just showed up for credit when things went well. I watched a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. He'd underestimated me before, seen me as the hard-working employee who would absorb any abuse. He was starting to realize his mistake. But he couldn't quite identify the threat. Not yet. That gave me time. Bryn approached me at lunch the next day. We'd always been friendly, but she'd kept her distance from office politics. Now she slid into the seat across from me in the cafeteria and lowered her voice. She was tired of Marcus taking credit for her work too. She'd been documenting his failures for months, keeping detailed records of every time he'd stolen an idea or blamed her for his mistakes. She wasn't the only one. Cade joined us mid-conversation, pulling up his phone to show spreadsheets tracking Marcus's forgotten client calls, missed deadlines and broken promises. They'd both been quietly collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. We formed an unofficial alliance right there over terrible cafeteria sandwiches. We weren't being petty. We were being strategic. Every mistake Marcus made we documented. Every client he ignored we noted. Every contract he mishandled we tracked. This wasn't revenge. This was building a legal case, creating an undeniable record of incompetence that even the executives couldn't ignore. Frontier Analytics sent a thank you email directly to me on Wednesday. Warren Blackwell had submitted a formal commendation to our CEO, praising my responsiveness and problem-solving. The email was forwarded through 4 levels of management before landing in my inbox. I read it 3 times, savoring each word. Marcus hadn't solved their problem. Marcus didn't even know the problem existed. The email was professional, measured, and absolutely devastating to Marcus's credibility. It specifically mentioned my name 6 times while never mentioning Central Division or Marcus once. I printed it out and added it to my growing file of documentation. Every piece of praise from a client, every solved problem, every success story. I was building a portfolio that proved beyond any doubt who actually ran this division. The satisfaction was small but real. I wasn't untouchable yet, but I was getting there. One documented success at a time. I was making myself indispensable while exposing Marcus's obsolescence. The Frontier contract became my secret weapon. I discovered it was more than just a $2.3 million account. Frontier served as a reference client for 3 other accounts we'd landed in the past year. If Frontier left, those clients would likely reconsider their relationships with us too. The total exposure was closer to $9 million. And the contract renewal required Marcus's signature by the end of the month. But Marcus didn't know that because he never read contract details. I prepared 2 documents. The first was the standard renewal with our existing terms. The second was a modified proposal I drafted independently, offering Frontier enhanced services at a competitive rate while protecting our profit margins. I didn't send either one yet. Instead, I waited. Marcus would eventually realize the renewal was coming due. He'd panic, scramble, and probably sign whatever was put in front of him without reading it. That's when I'd make my move. But first I needed more pieces in place. I needed the executives to see that I was the only thing standing between them and disaster. The quarterly review meeting happened the last Thursday of the month. The entire executive team attended. Our CEO, Veronica Strauss, sat at the head of the conference table looking bored. She'd heard Marcus's presentations before. They were always the same. Lots of optimism, vague promises, and carefully edited numbers that made everything look better than reality. This time, though, I'd submitted my own report in advance. Nothing dramatic, just a detailed analysis of Central Division's actual performance, complete with client retention rates, revenue projections, and risk assessments. When Marcus began his presentation, he followed his usual script. Everything was fine, targets were being met, the future looked bright. Then Veronica interrupted him. She'd read my report. She had questions about the discrepancies between his numbers and mine. Marcus fumbled, clearly unprepared. I kept my expression neutral as I clarified the data, explaining calmly where our numbers diverged and why. The room's energy shifted. People started paying attention. Marcus tried to regain control, but every answer he gave revealed how little he actually knew about our operations. My competence versus his ignorance. The contrast was impossible to miss. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. The victory in the meeting felt good, but doubt crept in during quiet moments. Was I going too far? Was this professional strategy or personal vendetta? I thought about the pay cut email now 2 weeks old. I thought about the years of watching Marcus take credit for my work, the promotions he'd blocked, the raises he'd denied while praising my performance. I thought about the other employees he'd pushed out, good people who'd left because they couldn't survive his management style. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone he'd stepped on while climbing a ladder built on other people's work. My moral compass steadied. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. Marcus had spent years avoiding consequences for his actions. I was simply making sure those consequences finally caught up with him. Justice, not malice. That distinction mattered to me. Rumors reached the executive floor by Monday morning. Bryn's friend in accounting heard Veronica questioning Marcus's numbers with the CFO. Cade overheard a conversation in the elevator about Central Division's actual performance metrics. The executives were finally paying attention, and they didn't like what they were seeing. Marcus became increasingly defensive. He started micromanaging everyone, demanding to be copied on every email, attending meetings he'd previously skipped. His panic made him sloppy. He snapped at clients, made promises he couldn't keep, and sent emails with obvious errors that Bryn quietly documented. I stayed calm through all of it. Professional, composed, unshakable. Every time Marcus showed stress, I showed stability. The contrast wasn't accidental. I was showing the executives who could actually lead this division. The pressure was building. Marcus could feel it but couldn't identify the source. He knew something was wrong but couldn't articulate what. That uncertainty made him more erratic, which made him look worse, which increased the pressure. Perfect feedback loop. I spent 2 days reviewing every HR policy, every employment contract clause, every corporate governance rule. Everything I was doing had to be completely legal and documented. I couldn't give Marcus or anyone else grounds to claim I'd acted improperly. My documentation was meticulous. Every conversation summarized in writing. Every decision backed by data. Every recommendation supported by evidence. I treated this like building a legal case because essentially I was. I consulted with an employment attorney friend without giving specific names or details. She confirmed what I suspected. Documenting poor management, advocating for better processes, and having client relationships weren't grounds for termination. As long as I didn't sabotage anything or violate confidentiality, I was protected. The tension in the office was palpable now. Everyone knew something was happening with Marcus, even if they didn't know the details. Some people started avoiding him, not wanting to be associated with whatever was coming. Others suddenly became very interested in documenting their own work, protecting themselves. The dominoes were starting to fall. The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning. Pinnacle Technologies, one of our major accounts, sent an email threatening to terminate their contract immediately. They'd been trying to reach Marcus for 2 weeks about a serious service issue. He'd ignored every call and email. Now they were done waiting. The account was worth $4.6 million annually. If they left, our quarterly numbers would crater. Panic spread through the office within an hour. The email had been sent to Veronica directly, copying Marcus and the entire executive team. There was no hiding this failure. Marcus called an emergency meeting. His face pale and sweating. He had no idea how to fix this. He looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to solve his problem like I always did. I let the silence stretch for 3 long seconds. Then I pulled out my phone and called Pinnacle's CEO directly. I had his personal number because I'd built that relationship over 3 years. Within 20 minutes, I had a meeting scheduled for that afternoon. Within 4 hours, I'd stabilized the situation and negotiated a path forward. The division was saved. But everyone, including the board, knew exactly who had saved it and who had nearly destroyed it. The board meeting happened 2 days after the Pinnacle crisis. Marcus was summoned to explain what had happened. I wasn't invited, but Brin's connection in executive services gave me the timeline. The meeting ran for 3 hours. Multiple board members asked pointed questions about Marcus's client management practices, his response times, and his understanding of our contract obligations. Veronica presented data comparing our division's performance to the other 3 divisions in the company. Central Division, despite having the highest value clients, had the worst client satisfaction scores and the highest at-risk contract percentage. The only bright spot was my personal accounts, which maintained 94% satisfaction ratings. The board started asking questions Marcus couldn't answer. How many active contracts did we have? He didn't know. Which ones were up for renewal this quarter? He wasn't sure. What was our client retention rate? He fumbled with vague numbers that were clearly wrong. Then they asked who had saved the Pinnacle account. Marcus tried to take credit. Veronica corrected him, citing my direct intervention and the CEO's specific praise for my handling of the crisis. My team began openly supporting me after the board meeting. Brin started redirecting client questions to me instead of Marcus, explaining that I was the actual point of contact for substantive issues. Cade volunteered to create detailed reports on every account I managed, highlighting success rates and client feedback. Other colleagues who'd stayed neutral started sharing their own stories of Marcus's failures and my interventions. I didn't encourage this, but I didn't stop it either. I maintained my professional composure, focusing on work and letting others speak freely about what they'd witnessed over the years. Marcus's credibility was eroding faster than I'd anticipated. Every day brought new revelations about ignored clients, forgotten deadlines, or mishandled contracts. The documentation my team compiled was devastating. Page after page of evidence showing a pattern of incompetence that spanned years. It wasn't a few mistakes or bad luck. It was systematic failure enabled by one person doing the actual work while another took the credit. That system was collapsing. And Marcus finally seemed to understand the danger he was in. The confrontation came during a division-wide meeting on Thursday. Marcus tried to reassert his authority by challenging me directly in front of everyone. He claimed I was overstepping my role, making decisions without his approval, and undermining his leadership. The room went silent, 20 people watching to see how I'd respond. I stayed seated, keeping my voice calm and professional. I pulled up my laptop and projected detailed records onto the conference room screen. Every decision I'd made, every client I'd contacted, every problem I'd solved. All documented, all with timestamps, all showing Marcus had either approved them in advance or ignored them entirely until problems escalated. Then I showed the client feedback. Email after email praising my work, specifically requesting me on their accounts, thanking me for responsiveness Marcus never provided. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I simply presented facts. The room stayed silent after I finished. Marcus's face was red, But he had no response. You can't argue with documentation. You can't dismiss client testimonials. You can't explain away your own failures when they're displayed on a screen in front of your entire team. I requested a meeting with Veronica the following Monday. Just the two of us in her office with the door closed. I'd prepared a presentation that took weeks to compile. Every contract we had, categorized by risk level. Every client relationship, mapped by key contact. Every failure point in our current structure. But I didn't lead with problems. I led with solutions. I proposed restructuring Central Division with clear account ownership, direct reporting lines, and accountability metrics that couldn't be fudged or hidden. I suggested splitting the division into 2 teams with separate leadership, ensuring better client coverage and eliminating single points of failure. I even offered to take a lateral move if needed, prioritizing the division's success over personal ambition. Veronica listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked one question. If I gave you control of this division today, what would you do first? I had the answer ready. I'd secure the Frontier contract, stabilize our 3 at-risk accounts, and implement the restructuring within 60 days. She nodded slowly. She'd make her decision by Friday. Marcus tried everything that week. He attempted charm, reminding Veronica of their 15-year working relationship. He tried intimidation, threatening to quit and take clients with him. He even attempted to undermine me, spreading rumors about my ambition and suggesting I'd sabotaged his work. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming. The client feedback too consistent. The pattern too clear. On Wednesday, he tried to go over Veronica's head directly to the board. That backfired spectacularly. The board had already reviewed all the documentation and made their recommendation. By Thursday afternoon, the decision was made. Marcus was being moved to a strategic advisory role, a polite fiction that meant his decision-making authority was gone. He'd keep his salary temporarily but lose his division leadership. I was promoted to division director, reporting directly to Veronica. The announcement would go out Friday morning. I felt no triumph when I heard the news, just tired satisfaction. The arrogance and entitlement that had protected Marcus for years couldn't survive direct exposure to his own failures. The system had finally worked the way it was supposed to. The Frontier contract landed on my desk on Friday afternoon. It had been prepared by legal and was ready for signatures. But there was a problem. The standard renewal terms weren't competitive given market changes over the past year. I could have just signed it and met my deadline. Instead, I pulled out the modified proposal I'd drafted weeks earlier. Enhanced services, better pricing structure, improved terms for both parties. I presented both options to Veronica with detailed analysis of the long-term value proposition. She approved the modified terms immediately. I called Warren Blackwell personally to walk through the new proposal. He was impressed with the proactive approach and the improved value. Frontier signed within 3 days, with a 3-year commitment instead of their previous annual reviews. The deal secured not just their contract, but strengthened our position with the 3 reference clients who relied on Frontier's relationship. Total secured revenue: $9.2 million over 3 years. Central Division's future was stable. And it happened because someone finally did the actual work of understanding client needs instead of just taking credit for existing relationships. I walked past Marcus's old office on Monday morning. The nameplate had been removed over the weekend. His personal items were packed in boxes stacked near the door, waiting for pickup. I didn't feel victorious looking at those boxes. I felt something quieter. Relief maybe. Validation that doing good work actually mattered. The injustice that started this, that pay cut email that arrived 5 weeks ago, had been reversed. My salary was restored and increased to match my new position. But more than that, the system that enabled Marcus's behavior for years had been exposed and dismantled. Other employees wouldn't have to endure what I'd endured. I'd learned something through this experience. Your worth isn't determined by people who refuse to see it. It's proven through the work itself, through the relationships you build, through the problems you solve. Arrogance eventually stumbles over its own hubris. Competence, documented and undeniable, becomes unassailable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation. It's simply doing your job better than anyone else can, letting the evidence speak for itself, and watching as the truth becomes impossible to ignore. I'd won not through anger or sabotage, but through strategy, patience, and the quiet power of being indispensable.